We're experiencing the worst win rates in B2B sales in at least a decade. Reps are demoralized, leaders are anxious, quotas keep climbing while results keep declining. And what are sales organizations doing about it? More calls, more demos, more pressure. But that's not the solution. It's actually the problem. Welcome to the Learn It All podcast, the show for today's leaders who want to get ahead and stay ahead, because we believe great leaders aren't born or made, they are always in the making. I'm your host, Damon Lemby, two-time best-selling author and CEO of Learn It, a live learning platform that has helped upskill over 2 million people over the past 3 decades. I'm super excited about my guest today. His name is Dave Brock. He's a globally recognized B2B sales leader, a go-to-market advisor, and author of one of my favorite books of all time, The Sales Manager Survival Guide. He's here to break down what's broken when it comes to build and lead sales teams and what modern leaders must do differently if we actually want to win.
Part of what I like to do is I like to talk to as diverse a group of people that I can and pick up their ideas, because then I can take it to my clients and say, this is some of the stuff that they do in their business. What if we tried applying some of this in your business?
In a moment, Dave and I will get into why most sales organizations confuse activity with progress, why teaching reps to think is more valuable than teaching them what to say, how coaching fails when it's treated as an event, not a habit, and why underperformance in most cases is a leadership problem, not a rep problem. You said, in what world is a 15 to 20% win rate acceptable? And you're not being rhetorical here. You look around, teams are missing quota all over the place. There's high churn for sales reps and sales leaders. What is really going on in the sales world these days?
It's astounding to me to see this and all is that we have seen year over year declines in performance around virtually every measure. We've seen win rates declining to right now the acceptable win rate, primarily in technology businesses, but it leaks to other businesses as well, is 15 to 20%. We've seen declines in, fewer than 40%. Usually the data I'm seeing right now is 37 to 38% of people are making goals. You see organizations not making their goals. So we've seen kind of this year after year erosion. I don't see the panic factor setting in. I don't see the panic factor in salespeople or leaders saying, what do we change to do this? What you see really are the behaviors really oriented around, well, we know the formula, let's just 2x, 4x, 10x the formula. And now that we have the tools like AI, it's really easy to 10, 50x, those kinds of things. But in spite of all those things that we've been doing, results aren't changing, they're plummeting. And so, you kind of want to grab people by their shoulders and shake them and say, if it isn't working, why don't you try looking at a different way of doing things?
And why do you think we're stuck in doing things the same way? Because you're right. I mean, you can do it over and over again. And if the results don't happen, you got to make some kind of change. And Dave, let's face it, with the state of the economy and the world right now, sales is not going to get any easier in 2025.
I think there are a number of contributing factors. There isn't any kind of one factor that has driven this. I think over the years, we've seen an evolution to what I'll call the mechanization of selling. And you go back to, it was a great book when it was originally written about, I guess, 15, 20 years ago now, Predictable Revenue by Aaron Ross. And it mapped out what was interesting at the time for Salesforce and its evolution. But as you started looking at some of the limitations of that, it took a manufacturing mindset to how we manage the sales process. So we create this manufacturing line, we put customers on the manufacturing line and run them through the SDRs, the BDRs, the AEs, and so on. And we've been doing that. The problem is if you really understand lean manufacturing, that's not how lean manufacturing works. And so we started with a flawed business model, but we've kept replicating that model. So one is we have this series of, I think, flawed business model and flawed assumptions around lean and agile and how we apply that to sales. Two is I think we're facing a world of just mounting disruption, overwhelm, and overload. So what I see is well-intended human beings at all level just struggling with what do I do and how do I cope. Um, you see the complexity increasing, and you see with like the announcements that we've seen over the last week or so, the economy is going to get much more difficult, and so you start seeing that as human beings, we tend to withdraw. We tend to go back into those things that we know and those things that worked for us in the past. And even we're somewhat irrational about it, but even though they don't work, they bring us comfort because it's the familiar. And when you have large groups doing the same thing, that tends to reinforce each other. So it takes a tremendous amount of courage, I think, for somebody to say, break out of that and say, this isn't working. It won't work anymore. What do we do and how do we change?
Yeah, and change is tough. And one of the things that you and I spoke about on our pre-call, which I think we were both passionate about, is it also kind of seems like part of this is related to people and organizations have kind of lost their drive to work hard as well.
Yeah. And that's something that just stuns me and I've had a bunch of conversations, I think, since our conversation. It's funny how the same conversation keeps popping up with different people. But I remember when I first started working, is I was just compelled to achieve. And I was compelled for a number of reasons, whether it was for income or promotions or that kind of thing. But I think underlying that is I was just compelled to achieve. So that said, I wanted to win everything that I did, and so on. And at the time, and what I see in so many other high performers is that they do everything possible to achieve. And when it isn't working, they figure out what they need to do. But what I've found so much recently is this is where I go and get my paycheck. I don't care so much about my company. I don't care about my business, about my customers and their business. I'm doing what I can to get by and get my paycheck, and I live my life somewhere else. Most jobs I know right now, we spend so much time in it. It seems like a tremendous waste of time that we aren't living our life in our work and doing well there.
I've got a couple questions around that, but do you think this is even accelerated more because of the hybrid work and everything with COVID, where people feel less connected to the organizations they work with?
I think it's accelerated, or sometimes I think we use it as an excuse because we saw the signs of this happening before COVID. We saw signs of declining employee engagement. We saw signs of declining tenure, of kind of revolving doors, of at all levels of management, of individual contributors, and so on. I think COVID and the work from home kind of thing kind of accelerated that and accentuated that. But we saw the leading indicators of that earlier. And I think a lot of that have to do with things that we talked about before is around, are we creating workplaces where people feel valued and contribute and where people want to stay?
Belonging is so important these days, right? People want to feel like they belong, that their organization understands what their purpose is. How does that purpose tie into the organization? So, is this what you're seeing high performing organizations doing differently? Is it around a stronger culture?
One of the things that I measure when I start looking at organizations is culture and purpose and the alignment of culture and purpose in the organization. And you see, I mean, this isn't all kind of, you know, uh, you know, kumbaya type stuff. I mean, I work with some organizations that have very, very tough cultures and very aggressive cultures, but everybody's aligned around the same purpose and around the same value system that it works for them. I see other corporations with very different cultures, but people are aligned and they work very well there. And I think, I'll go back to what you said is this: we all want to belong. What's happened is somehow in corporate cultures is people don't get their need for belonging satisfied at work. So they're searching for other places, whether it's games that they play in group social media groups that they join, whether it's outside work kinds of things. They're searching for belonging in other places. And so the organizations and corporations are losing on that because they aren't creating an environment where people want to belong and want to stay, and fundamentally where people feel valued and heard.
So, if I'm in an organization, I'm a leader right now, and I'm like, you know what, these guys are probably right. I think we are a little disconnected. I mean, you can't broil the ocean and get it all fixed right away. But what is one piece of advice? Where could they start?
I think be very, very clear about what your purpose is. What is it that you here as a corporation are trying to do? And it's beyond, we want to make money and we want to scale at 200% a year and that kind of thing. But who is it that we're here to serve? What is it that we're trying to achieve as an organization? Um, and then you start looking at how you achieve it, and then you start looking at how you start achieving that and executing it every day, and that day-to-day action starts setting your culture. And from that, you start attracting people that are more aligned with those things than not. And in your recruiting process, you have to be very careful that people are aligned. We work with a lot of organizations in developing competency models. What should we look at? And most people look at skills, experience, background, and those kinds of things. What we found is the biggest determinant is culture, values, and purpose, and that those are aligned. So, for instance, I have some clients where if you look at average tenure is somewhere around 11 to 18 months in any level of sales related roles. Um, I have clients with average tenures of 9 years, 15 years. I have a client that's about a $15 billion organization that if you look at their sales organization, voluntary and involuntary turnover within the year is less than 3%.
I don't want to just pass it over because you said it. One of your client has the tenure is 11 to 18 months. That's horrible.
That's the markets, the industry. Okay. If you look at industry in general, we look at 11 to 18 months turnover. So you look at kind of the mechanics of that in complex B2B sales. So you look at, if I'm a new salesperson in a complex B2B type of marketplace, how long does it take me to ramp up? When I started selling, it was, the formal ramp period was a 12 to 18 month period. And I guess maybe I was slow and also they made it longer for us, but and here today, if I look at, say ramp periods are typically 6 months to a year. So I start running the math and I say, let's take the low end of it. It's 6 months for me to ramp up and understand what to do and what we're selling, blah, blah, blah. Now I got to start developing pipeline. Well, I got to start developing pipeline and maybe we get a lot of inbound stuff and we can do this. So I can start developing pipeline over 3 months, maybe 6 months. So now we have about 9 to 12 months elapsed. And then we start saying buying cycles. Buying cycles in complex B2B sales are 9, 12, 18, 24 months. So I start adding that all together, and somehow the math doesn't work. If I'm only around for 11 to 18 months, how do I look at that math and say, how am I building any competence or any business? And whatever success these people are having are probably based on the work that their predecessor or their predecessor's predecessor did. If I look at it from a management point of view, I come in and I work for about 11 to 18 months. Say I'm a hyper aggressive manager and say, I'm going to hit the ground running. I know the changes I want to make. But in any large organization, it takes some time to change. So you look at any massive change initiative is going to take 3 to 6 months, and it takes you a few iterations to know that you're on the right track. So again, you start running the math on that, and you scratch your head and said, well, with average 10 years of 11 to 18 months, none of this math works out. Something's not working. And what you see is the behaviors you see of salespeople is they just keep their heads down. They know this too will pass. The behaviors of managers is that they are changing their playbooks to say, what can I do and have an impact on in 11 months, knowing that I'm going someplace else after that. And the problems that they're attacking are probably not the most important problems impacting their growth. So you have this kind of death spiral of behaviors that are built up around this.
Yeah, so you have this death spiral of behaviors around on the individual rep level, on the leadership level, and even it seems like if you bring somebody into the organization, they feel like, hey, I may not be here more than 18 months. So instead of coming on board and kind of seeing what the culture is like and what's going on, I got to make changes right away, which we all, at least I think, isn't the right way to go about things. So, with all that being said, you mentioned that they're not making or they're not looking at the right areas. Where should they be focusing their attention?
Well, it is, so much of what we've done is and again, if you had Matt Dixon on before and you start looking at how much we miss and how late we're getting involved. So now sales typically is not getting involved in the customer buying process until they're somewhere around 80 to 85% through. So basically, sales is becoming a version of an order taker. By the time the customer gets to that point, they have developed a short list. They've developed their ideas and their requirements, which may be wrong, and they go through that. So we have these very, very short sales cycles. We're solving the smallest part of the customer problems, and any of the solutions they choose can solve their problems. So how do we win? Well, we win by discounting, and that kind of thing. If we start looking at getting involved earlier, then we start looking at how do we help shape the customer's decision-making process? How do we help shape their buying process to help them do the right thing and to help them develop confidence that they're doing the right thing? In your interviews with Matt, you learned that over 60% of budgeted buying efforts end in no decision made. It's not because they haven't been able to select the right product. They don't know whether they're doing the right thing for themselves or the organization. So how do we help build their confidence that they're doing the right thing? We have to get involved earlier in the process. So we do some things like we call it business-focused selling. We say, how do we get involved with the customer much earlier on and talk to them about their business and about their problem, and never mention our product or our solutions at all, even if they ask. all we care about is helping them better understand the change initiative and what they're trying to do, and better understand what questions should we be asking ourselves. How do we look at really what the impact of the problem is? How do we look at the risk of not changing and the risk of changing? Who else should be involved? How do we learn more about the problem? So if you start working with the customer and helping them with that, one of the things you're doing naturally is you're building trust and you're building confidence with the customer. They're viewing you more as a partner. Two is what you see them doing is that you're building actually a bias to them because they keep coming back to you for help. And then at some point they say, how can you help us? And so you start talking about what your solution is and how you can help them. So you go through this. So what we've noticed when we have clients doing this is their win rates at least double. We have like one client, and it's hard to believe their win rates have gone from 57% to 92%. We have other clients in the 60, 70, 80% win rate range. So when you compare that to 15 to 20%, they've just skyrocketed performance. And this is all on existing opportunity. Then two is win rates skyrocket. We've started seeing since Matt wrote his book and I started becoming more sensitive to this, we've seen no decisions made. So far, we're seeing by about 25%. But the most remarkable thing we see is buying cycles are reduced by 30 to 40%. And why is that happening? Because customers don't know how to buy. And they wander, they start to stop, they shift directions, they shift priorities, they start and stop again and wander around. And 60% of the time, they just stop and abandon the thing. With us acting really as orchestrators and helping them them move through the buying process, we help them move through very, very efficiently and very, very confidently. So what we get at the end of this is more than double win rates, reduced no decisions made, and 30 to 40% reduction in sales cycle. And all it is done by strictly focusing on the customer.
It sounds simpler than it is, Dave, because a lot of sales reps are so trained to think about features and benefits first, and they can't wait to pull up their slide deck and tell you about all their features and benefits. And what you're saying is the approach needs to be around how to serve the customer, either save pain points or help them achieve the outcomes they want. And it sounds like it's all about curiosity, problem solving, right? And really communication to build that trust.
Well, underlying that, one is it starts with curiosity. It starts with kind of critical thinking and problem solving. It is collaborative conversations. I was talking to somebody earlier today about how we need to purge the idea of a pitch from our language. The only place that I think the word pitch should end up being is in baseball, a soccer pitch or a cricket pitch or something like that. But other than that, pitch as related to sales should be banished, and all we should be looking for collaborative conversations. But underlying that, you really need business acumen. How do I hold a high impact conversation with a customer if I don't understand the business? And all our people are trained to do is they're trained in our products and how to pitch the products. They don't necessarily understand how the products, they understand the problem the products help the customer solve, but they don't understand the problem itself. So they don't understand how to talk to the customer about the things that are most important to them. So if you just start with some basic business acumen and learning about the customer and learning about their problems and learning about what they think about and talking to them literally in their language, it's amazing how quickly you change your results and how quickly you build trust and confidence with your customers.
Two reasons for the lack of business acumen. One goes all the way back to what we started at the beginning, where you have so many different segments of sales. You know, like the SDRs does this, the sales manager does this, and also relying too much on the subject matter expert that you bring in, right? So if you bring in a subject matter expert, then the salesperson sometimes feels like, well, it's not my responsibility. I could just pivot over and let this person talk about it. But what I hear you saying is great salespeople these days and sales leaders need to build up that big business acumen, be curious, and spend more time learning about their customers, which there's no excuse for these days, especially with ChatGPT and other tools to learn about your
Yeah.
customers.
Yeah, I think so. I think there are a couple of things there that I'll dive into a little bit. One is when we look at subject matter experts, typically what we're looking at as subject matter experts are product experts,
Product experts. Yeah.
not business problem experts. So that subject matter expertise that we're developing is very useless for customers until the very final stages of the buying process. And that's the easiest part of their buying process. So we need, if we're going to have subject matter experts, we need experts in the problems that our customers are facing and experts at helping them navigate those problems. We go earlier on, SDRs. You know, a lot of people I talk to about SDRs, I say, who are your SDR is supposed to contact? Well, the decision makers. They're going to have conversations with the decision makers about what their needs are and convince them to have a meeting with an account executive. So where do we get our SDRs? You know, we get them fresh out of college programs. They may have had some sales training and all that kind of thing there, but we train them to call on directors, vice presidents, senior vice presidents, maybe CEOs. I remember a number of years ago, I had an SDR call me up and he said, Dave, we really think you're underperforming your business potential and that you should be doing a whole lot more. Can I talk to you about it? And I said, that's interesting. What am I doing wrong? And he said, well, we'd like to schedule you for a demo. And I said, no, wait. I said, you said something that's very intriguing to me. What am I doing wrong? And he said, well, we'll talk to you about this in the demo. And I kept going back. I said, you said something interesting. What am I? And he couldn't answer that question. He didn't do that. So we trained these SDRs to have these conversations. I wasn't trying to trick the guy or be a jerk or anything like that.
He brought it up.
He brought up this very interesting premise and he couldn't support it. I created a lot of controversy. I was doing a speech to several hundred people a number of years ago, and we were talking about the same issues, SDRs. And I said, I love SDRs. I had back when I ran a business unit at a very large technology corporation, I hired about 4 of them. I paid them each $500,000 a year. And all of a sudden people look at me and say, no, SDRs are 60 to 80K, maybe 100K if they've gone really over this. I said, I paid them $500,000 a year. And what I had is my SDRs are very different. My SDRs were senior design engineers. They were senior manufacturing managers. Some of them had director and vice president titles. And I said, because the customers they need to talk to are the CEO of Boeing Aerospace, the chief engineer of General Motors, the chief product officer of International Harvester and all those types of things. And to do that, they had to be credible. They had to really understand the business. And so, with those 4 people that I paid $500,000 each, within 2 years, we built over $20 billion of pipeline because they had this credible engagement with people. They could get them really excited in imagining new possibilities for the business. We built $20 billion of pipeline and we closed 70% of it. And so I'm all for SDRs, but I want to get the right SDRs. And if we're targeting SDRs that are looking at mid-level or higher level managers, then they have to have a little bit of business background or business acumen. So I look at a career path. I'd say, I want to take one of my best AEs and I want to move them into an SDR role, because imagine the hit rates they'll get if they have that experience and can really engage people credibly.
Now, besides moving an AE into an SDR role, I'm sitting here thinking, what are some other roles in an organization that a leader might be looking at? Like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. Um, Maybe I should pull somebody out of product or somewhere else. Do you have any other ones you recommend?
A lot of people in product management, I mean, presumably product management has been deeply involved in understanding the customers and the problems that they're trying to solve with the products. So they can bring a lot of product expertise. Those SDRs I hired decades ago in this one business unit, a lot of them came from product development and product management. It happened we were selling engineering, development, and design and automation systems, so they were using those tools every day, so it helped. Um, pull them out of product development, pull them out of strategy. People that understand kind of the business and those kinds of things. Um, Take some of your most senior and experienced salespeople. What I found again in that past experience is I had these very senior, very expensive people uh, um, creating such pull that the expertise I needed to actually manage the deal after they had gotten the customer all hot and lathered to change was much less. And so we could do things very efficiently and very effectively. But what we had to do was incite people to change, to give them a new vision of things, and to be credible in how we do that.
And I think what's important you're saying too is like that company with the 20 billion in pipeline. You think about SDRs and you're like, okay, we need to keep throwing on the pipeline. But if your win rate's only 15 to 20%, a hidden factor in there is you're really hurting your brand as well, because you'll probably have some garbage conversations.
Imagine the brand damage that you're doing. So, an exercise I take people through is, imagine two salespeople. We have Dave and Damon. Both of them have $10 million quotas. Both of them have $5 million pipelines. Damon's win rate is 40%. Dave's win rate is 20%. So I tell managers this scenario and I said, what do you coach them about? Natural reaction is they need to go out and prospect. They need to go out and build a 3X pipeline. And I'd say, well, let's think about that. Damon's a pretty good salesperson. He only needs a 2.5X pipeline to make his numbers. And also, if you force him to spend the time to build a 3X pipeline, you're going to be diverting his time from the stuff that he's really good at, and you'll probably decrease his win rate. All you need to do is coach him in how to prospect and develop an additional 50% to his pipeline, so that he has an additional 2.5 million to his pipeline. So he has a 12.5 million, and he'll probably be very good in that kind of thing. So again, he only needs a 2.5X pipeline. Dave sucks. Dave, if he built a 3X pipeline, he needs a 5X pipeline to make his number. And if he's so bad at doing these deals, imagine how bad he's going to be at prospecting. And imagine how much brand damage he's going to do to your company, because he just sucks. So what do you do to help Dave? Well, what you do to help Dave is, how do you get Dave better at competing with the deals that he's doing right now? Qualify the deals better, help him win the deals, help him raise his win rate. Then his pipeline dynamics change quite a bit. And then he starts becoming almost as good as you, Damon. probably not quite as good, um, but he becomes almost as good as you. The pipeline dynamics change. He can go out and prospect and do much less brand damage. But we don't see how all these things fit together. And we have kind of these one size fits all solutions for everybody that we do. And we fail 100% of the time when we do that.
What I think is so key that you're talking about here, Dave, is that you don't have this one size fits all when it comes to coaching. Uh, People need different things on your teams in different areas, which is kind of leads me to where I wanted to go with this, which is your great book that you wrote in 2016, Sales Manager's Survival Guide, which was first referred to me by Mike Weinberg, one of my favorite New Sales Simplified. He told me, Damon, you have to read this book. You're going to really connect with it. And it's great. And a lot of the things we talk about here is like the frontline sales leaders, managers, they really don't know what their job is.
Right.
Right. So how do we help them identify what their job should be?
Well, I think the first problem we have is, are we putting the right people into the right roles of frontline sales manager?
100%.
Is so much of the time we take our very top performers and say, because you're our top performer, you'll probably be a great sales manager. And 90% of the time that's wrong. Is they're probably the worst sales managers in the world. And so we've gotten a double whammy. Not only have we lost their individual productivity, but they're infecting the rest of the team that they're managing and doing that. So one is we have to make sure we get the right people into those roles. Then two is we have to make sure that they are very clear about what their job is. And when I go talk to a lot of frontline sales managers, not just new ones, but experienced frontline sales managers, I say, what's your job? And they say, it's to make the number. And I said, no. That's your people's job. Your people's job is to make the numbers. Your job is to do everything you can to enable them to do that. So whether that's getting them the right tools, the right support, the right training, the right programs, and most importantly, the right coaching. That's your job, is to enable your people to achieve their goals. And if they collectively achieve their goals, then you'll achieve your goal and contribute to your boss achieving their goal.
Yeah, and you said most importantly is getting them the right coaching. So, what does the right coaching look like from a frontline sales manager to their individual reps?
There's a whole. I mean, well, I wrote a whole book about it, and I'm writing another book about it. But what we'll do is we'll shorten it. It's how we coach, and there are different techniques between directive and non-directive coaching, and so, the way people learn is more through non-directive coaching. Is we ask questions and we get them to think about this, and the best way to liken non-directive coaching is the old proverb that says, feed a person to fish, they eat for a day. Teach a person to fish, and they eat for the rest of their lives. What you're doing in coaching is you're maybe using a specific opportunity or a specific thing to help them think about doing it differently, to develop their skills so that they're applying those same skills in every other situation that they face. So we really want to leverage is non-directive coaching as much as possible. There are some people that say that's all you do, that you can't do directive coaching. But if I'm sitting in a car with you and you're going 80 miles an hour towards a telephone pole, I'm going to get directive really quick. I'm going to say, Damon, slam on the brakes. And also you have to balance that. So it's the balance between directive and non-directive coaching. Then two is it's knowing what to coach. And so I've evolved my philosophy on that a little bit. So we have to be, typically, if we look at how we spend our days as managers in business management, we do pipeline reviews, we do deal reviews, we do account reviews, we look at prospecting and all that, and we have one-on-ones. the objective of each one of those meetings is very different. The underlying principles that we use for coaching, applying non-directive coaching to that, are very much the same, but we lose track of that. So every pipeline review I've ever sat in before I've kind of infected them with my thinking is it's always turned out to be a deal review. We start looking at the pipeline, somebody looks at a deal, and we spend 15 minutes going into that deal. Then we go, look at the pipeline again, we go to the next deal. So we do really bad deal reviews and we never get to pipeline reviews. So we have to be very clear about the objective of each meeting that we have, so that we coach to those objectives within each meeting. The objective in a pipeline review is to look at quality, volume, velocity. The objective in a deal review is to say, how do we maximize our ability to win and move this forward as aggressively as possible? The objective of account review is to say, our God-given right is 100% share of customer. How do we achieve that? How do we expand our reach to the rest of the customers? So we have all these different objectives. So those are the ways we use our normal business management meetings. The thing that I've become I had underestimated a number of years ago is the value of ad hoc conversations. Is when we're standing in a line at Starbucks, how do I get into a coaching conversation with somebody, even though it may be a minute long or 90 seconds long? How do I start developing some through themes of what am I going to do to coach Damon and improve his ability to do his job? And so I have, there are 2 or 3 things I really want to focus on with Damon. So when we're going out to lunch or we're driving out to meet a customer or when they're standing in the Starbucks line, if I get these little intermittent kind of sound bites of a minute, 90 seconds, I want to use that as a coaching opportunity to help them learn. And what we're seeing in some of the, everybody is time pressured right now. As much as somebody wants to allocate the time to sit down and do the one-on-one coaching, they can. The reality is they simply don't have the time. So what we're seeing is the ability of people to think of every interaction I have with one of my people represents a coaching opportunity, and not how do I jump from this to this to this to that and confuse people, but what's the underlying through line of 2 or 3 things I want to work with that person now on, and then the next 2 or 3 things that I want to work as I develop that individual.
Do you have any insights to help frontline leaders or leaders at any level to kind of switch that mindset around so that they can unlock some of those coaching moments, whether you're at Starbucks or, as we used to call it all day, window time, so you're not just BSing about the weather during that time?
I have kind of a 12-step thing to, establishing collaborative conversations and coaching conversations. One of the things that we've been doing a lot recently is applying lessons from improv into this. And if you look at the basic principles around effective improv, it's the yes and kind of approach. And how do you in improv, you always have your partner's back. You want to make your partner look good, and your partner will want to make you look good. And you establish this thing of how do you build the scene and the skit with that through the conversation. And you have these various approaches, the yes and those kinds of things that allow you to do that. If you look at that, those are fundamentals to good collaborative conversations and good coaching conversations. So we actually use improv in a lot of our workshops and sessions where, people get up and you have a little bit of fun with it, but you start learning about how to apply these principles of working together to a solution rather than just do this, and come back to me when you have it done.
That's interesting. It's making me think about maybe I should, we have one of our facilitators on our team who's an improv instructor. have him start working with Joe Little. I'm thinking of you, buddy. Have him start working with the sales team or in customer success team about how we can connect those two.
Yeah, I have a good friend, Rob Peterson, who's a professor at a university in Illinois, and he happened to have gone through workshops at Second City in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually teaches in his class a lot of improv. Um, and he and I, in our conversations, we try and one up each other with our sick jokes and our bad improv. And he just tells me, Dave, you need to either stop this or go to Second City and learn a lot more. But those principles, again, they're principles of how do we work together to achieve a common goal, and that's what coaching really is.
And so, what I hear you saying as well is that coaching doesn't have to be this formal 1 hour session here, 1 hour session there. It's try to work it into so-called the cracks of time with individuals. May even be more effective with people's attention span.
You still need to, where you can, have those formal sessions that are very objective driven, like a pipeline review or a deal review or those kinds of things. But the reality is fill in every crack you can as a coaching opportunity. And then cumulatively, this has a massive, massive impact on you.
Is there anything from, you mentioned that this is something you thought differently since your book came out in 2016 with the ad hoc. Is there anything from your book now that's almost 10 years that you no longer subscribe to? Like I don't recommend that at all anymore.
No, actually, it's, I'm not doing this to sell more books. I think it's more relevant now than it was 10 years ago because we're seeing where the problems back in 2016, you're seeing the emergence of some of these things. And
Can you give an example?
Win rates. Back then, win rates were much higher, usually in the 30% range. I used to joke, not really joke, because I did it. I'd fire people whenever their win rates went lower than 30%. If I couldn't coach them to improve and they consistently had 30% win rates, I'd fire them. And 30% was way too low. So back then, win rates were higher. Back then, average tenures were longer and things like that. So what we've seen is the precursors to the problems that existed when I was writing the book have become more accentuated right now. For instance, time available for coaching is just gone down the tubes. If you look at how much people are interrupted with things and all that. And I think back then, what I didn't see was the enormity of that time pressure and the enormity of the kind of disruption pressure and uncertainty. And I underestimated the value of filling in every crack you can with ad hoc coaching.
And your new book is coming out, Sales Executive Survival Guide, sometime in 2025. And is this like an evolution of the last book?
The Sales Manager Survival Guide focused on the frontline sales managers and how to maximize the performance of each individual on the team. The Sales Executive Survival Guide focuses on the top executives in the organization and how we build organizational excellence. So if you look at some of the things that we talked about earlier in this conversation of culture, purpose, values, building those kinds of things, how we deal with massive disruption, how we deal with uncertainty, how we innovate and how we change. Those are the central themes in this book. One of the reasons it's been pushed behind a little bit is now we're starting to look at how do we leverage AI in very
That was my next
impactful
question.
ways. Okay, yeah. How do we leverage AI in very impactful ways?
And what have you found so far? Not to give away all your secrets, but what have you found so far as how, from an sales executive perspective, start leveraging AI?
So much of the what you see fashionable with AI right now is what it does for us. And what we need to do is really twist our mentality to say what we do with AI. and how do we collaborate with it. Um, is I wrote a blog post a few weeks ago that stirred up some controversy. I said at the top of the blog post, is AI really that good, or are we that bad? Um, and what you discover is a, and this sounds terribly arrogant and negative, and perhaps I mean it that way, is AI will be as stupid as we are,
Mhm.
or AI will be as smart as we are. So when I see people at at whatever level using AI and going through very fascinating prompt scenarios and going through, I'm not trying to get AI to give me the answer. I'm using AI to help me think about things differently. I use ChatGPT or Claude. I kind of jump back and forth between them. Is I use them as debate partners. I start saying, "Here's an idea I have. Let's expand on the idea." So to go through and expand on the idea quite a bit, I said, "What are the flaws in my thinking?" And we'll go through the flaws in my thinking and then say, well, what are 10 recommendations for going forward? What's wrong with each one of those recommended, and we'll go back and forth. And I don't ever accept what it gives me, but it helps me think very differently and helps improve the quality of my work in just tremendous ways. And if you look at the real kind of top people in AI itself, I'm doing a project right now with the guy, senior vice president at Microsoft, who runs all of AI development in what's called customer service and customer care. So they're developing products to offer their customers. They're developing products within their own organization. And the way this guy thinks about using AI just blows me away. And it's not, can you write 1,000 emails to me to this kind of persona? It's really in that kind of critical thinking, problem solving mode.
Yeah, it kind of the theme of our conversation is around curiosity, critical thinking, and problem solving. Now you're tying it into AI. And what I hear you saying is that you want the AI should be not a thought leader where you just put something in and it just spits it out and you agree to it, but more of a thought partner, somebody you can debate with. And I'm stealing that from Jeff Woods, who was on my show, who wrote a fabulous book called AI Driven Leader, which I thought was fantastic. And I'm also kind of curious on the side, do ChatGPT and Claude give you much different answers? Is it worth challenging it through both?
Week by week, my answer changes because they're both stair stepping each other in what they do. Um, uh, Claude has much more of a personality in its interaction. I have learned how to prompt ChatGPT to have much more of a personality um, on this, but Claude naturally is trained to have much more of a personality and to provide some pushback and some things like that. You can get ChatGPT to do that, but again, you know, this week ChatGPT has more of a personality than it had last week.
Yeah,
So,
I see
so
that.
you see that, yeah, yeah. It's actually I have a master prompt that I start whether I'm with Claude or with ChatGPT. I have a master prompt that I just load into it saying, this is who I am. This is how I think. This is what I do. This is what I expect of you and how I want you to interact with me. So I start every conversation by preloading that before I've even started talking about the issues I want to talk about. So I set its behavior for me as a thought partner before I even start asking it questions.
With all your success over so many decades, what is it about you that keeps you still curious and interested in learning, where it could be very easy to just kind of settle in and say, I've already accomplished all this. Who cares about AI or any of this new stuff?
I actually started out, I was training as being a theoretical physicist. and I was going to do research in theoretical physics at Berkeley and teach classes and all that. So that curiosity and natural problem solving kind of thing has always been part of me, and I can't imagine life without that. As I look at right now, I have met so many interesting people. I've gotten so many interesting ideas, and I've gotten ideas in, as I said, I do sometimes hang out with improv actors, and I get ideas in talking to them that I say, have you ever, I go to a business and said, have you ever thought of doing something this way? Or years ago, I was doing a bunch of work with some companies on innovation. I was working with one large semiconductor company, and I was working with a small, I had a side business in extreme sports, and it was not that successful, but it got me to hang out with cool people and got me free motorcycles and free surfboards and cool gear and all that kind of stuff. But I was doing um, an innovation project for a small extreme sport manufacturer. And I said, geez, it's innovation. Why don't we slap these two people together? So we were in the boardroom of one of these semiconductor companies. And you can imagine along one side, this was about 20 years ago, were all these people in powder blue shirts and khakis. On the other side were people in leathers, torn t-shirts, full sleeves of tattoos, and the visible piercings were in really interesting places. And they were looking at each other, then they'd look at me and you'd see them kind of saying, "Well, what the?"
Yeah.
So we just started talking. And I said, tell me about how innovation and change works in extreme sports in your industry. And then I'd say with the semiconductor guys, tell me about how it works in that. All of a sudden, I just backed off. They started talking to each other. And what they found is ideas that were commonplace in their industry, when adapted and tweaked for, say, extreme sports, were groundbreaking, and vice versa. Some of the ideas and things that they were doing in extreme sports, when adapted and tweaked for the semiconductor industry, were just innovative and groundbreaking. So part of what I like to do is I like to talk to as diverse a group of people that I can and pick up their ideas, because then I can take it to my clients and say, I was talking to, and this literally was it, I was talking to this hip hop band that has this really great reputation. And this is some of the stuff that they do in their business. What if we tried applying some of this in your business? And the band, it happened to be Wu-Tang. I spent some time with Wu-Tang a number of years ago. And
Now you must
working with
have
them
good stories about them. You don't have to
and
tell me now, but yeah.
what they were doing in their business. And I could go to some, big industrial product manufacturers or big professional services firms and say, they're doing some things to reach and connect with their customers in very intriguing ways. How could we do similar things in this business?
I think that that's incredible and it's so smart. Get out of your bubble. Don't go looking at what you're already doing internally or even your competitors. Look at completely separate industries, or in this case, music acts or sports teams, and figure out how can I take a piece of what they're doing and maybe leverage it for ourselves or for our customers.
Yeah.
Super
Right
important.
now, I'm mentoring junior in high school. I'm mentoring some people in college. I'm mentoring some very young people. And actually, I learn more from them because, I've become an old fart, and, they teach me some new things and help me look at things differently. And they claim that they're learning a lot from me. So it's really, get way outside your bubble, both in terms of generation, in terms of, uh, uh, however diverse you can get, you'll always learn something new.
I'm with you on that. I'm in my 50s and I love having conversations either high school kids or even people in their 20s, and just being open-minded to what they're having to say, that's why I enjoy mentoring people as well, because it is reciprocal both ways. Dave, I mean, you're awesome. Before we close out, is there anything else we haven't spoke about that you wanted to talk about?
Well, we could go on for hours and hours. It's we're just doing some fascinating things in AI right now, and I'm just really excited with some of the pilots around helping people learn. What we're doing is we're developing this really. I talked a lot about our business focused solutions type things, and we run a lot of workshops, a lot of coaching sessions, and things like that. We've taken major parts of that and put that in AI. Um, and we have these very collaborative problem solving conversations that AI goes through with the person that just blows me away. Um, is that the AI tool can calibrate how much you know. It knows the end goal that we're trying to help our students get through. It can calibrate where you are right now and what it needs to teach you to get to that end goal. So every course looks very different for each person, and then they can also start customizing it by bringing in their sales experiences or particular deals and so on. And we've just been testing this, and what people are seeing from this is really we've had a few expert opinions that um, nobody in is leveraging AI learning tools the way we are right now. And I expect I mean, part of that is it's hard to know what everybody's doing, but there are only a small number of people starting to do that. I mean, once it becomes visible, people will figure out how to do it. But it's just exciting to see how you can engage people and how you can get them to change so quickly and learn so quickly. And plus, they become the cool kids on the block. They're leveraging these tools in really profound ways. So I'm really excited by what we're starting to see from that.
And are those courses through your company?
Yes, yeah, right. We haven't. We're about to launch them. Um,
And what's the name of it? I wanna make sure I put I'm not in the link in I know you haven't launched them yet, but just where the courses are in general.
There'll be uh, two initial courses that we do in our um, we've been doing for a long time these things like it's called the customer focused Brock questionnaire and the problem focused Brock questionnaire. What I did is I developed a technique watching. I don't know if you watch Stephen Colbert, but Stephen Colbert every once in a while has this thing he calls the Colbert questionnaire. In its 15 questions that completely characterize somebody. And so he gets an actor on and says, I interview, but I really don't get to know you. Let me talk to you. Let me ask you these 15 questions. And the first question is, what's your favorite sandwich? And one of the questions is, what number am I thinking of? And people are always wrong. But it's interesting what you get in those questions, how well you get to really understand somebody, because the questions stimulate this conversation. So years ago, developed this concept around how do we really get to know our customer? And it's how do we go talk to them about what's your work week look like? Who do you depend on? Who depends on you? How are you measured? All those, what changes have you seen? So there are 15 questions that we completely calibrate a person in a role. We've done thousands and thousands of interviews. So the analytics we get from that are really kind of interesting. Recently, we discovered that was insufficient, that people understood what questions people do. And now we're starting to say, how do we understand the problem? How do we get people to really understand not what their product does, but the problem itself? So we've developed a 15 question problem focused questionnaire. And we've been doing that. So this recent thing is we've converted both to AI. And so we've converted it to this AI discussion where 90 minutes, we can teach somebody how to do that and do their first role play. And it's very, very deep. And we can do it. I was talking to a friend of mine early this morning. He happens to be in Tel Aviv. And he said, Dave, do you know I interacted with it in Hebrew? And it changed its whole language to deal with me in Hebrew.
Incredible.
And it says it's pretty good. And so we're doing that. I'll roll those two out within probably the next 45 days.
Okay. So this episode will be out in early May. So probably by August, at least, it should be out.
Probably by the end of May, June, you'll be able to see it. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I mean, Dave, this has been a wonderful conversation. To recap some of the things we talked about, is we talked about the decay in sales, with whether it's a win rate or team quota being less than 40%. We discussed the importance of curiosity, critical thinking, problem solving, and how to shift from thinking about things from a feature base to helping out with the outcomes that you're looking for. So many great things we talked about. The role of the frontline manager and finding ways to do ad hoc coaching, which I think is critical. And this discussion around AI that you're obviously very passionate about. So thank you so very much. Where can our listeners connect with you at?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn. They can the website is partnersinexcellenceblog.com. And you can publish my email address. And all, but no, I look forward to the feedback. I've really enjoyed this discussion. Thanks for putting up with me for such a long time. It's been a fun discussion.
It's just an honor to be able to learn from somebody like you. And I really mean that. From the first time I heard your name, when Mike Weinberg told me about the Sales Manager Survival Guide, to now. So thank you, Dave. And for our listeners out there, do me a favor. If you're in sales, especially if you're a frontline sales manager, you got to check out Dave's work. Please send this episode to your friends who can get value out of it. There you go. Look, you got the book there. You've got it right there. I want my autographed copy. I'll pick it up when I come see you up north. And until next time, everybody, stay curious, keep learning, and have a great day. Thank you.
Or can you get into a company doing what you used to do, but network and try to connect with the area that you want to go into, and know it's a company that